I'm Mike Abbott with the Thomson Reuters Thought Leadership Organization. The legal market in the People's Republic of China is about as dynamic as they come, according to data from Acritas. Thomson Reuters and Acritas have joined forces on a new report focusing on the legal market in China. Today I'm joined by Lisa Hart Shepherd, CEO of Acritas, who will provide a little bit of insight around the findings of that report. So Lisa, welcome.
Thank you.
We look at Peer Monitor data, and Peer Monitor tracks law firm performance for U.S. firms, and we see that demand for legal services for law firms is increasing, but a much slower pace than we saw, 7 to 10 years ago. What's the picture look like in China right now?
Oh, in China, it's radically different. So the way we capture the data is slightly different. We're talking to legal departments, law departments about their spend intentions, whether it's increasing, decreasing in the year ahead. And what we've found is it's increasing on every level, both internationally, domestically. Growth is outperforming every other market. So we're seeing that the Chinese organizations are spending more in China, they're spending more outbound to other markets as they internationalize more. And also the inbound demand from multinationals around the world for work, legal work in China is increasing too. So all directions it's growing.
Do you see that increase in demand coming from increases in business activity or economic growth?
Yeah, it's that, but it's also an increasing sophistication of the legal services market. So, for example, we're seeing more demand for regulatory advice, for banking and finance advice. So as the market grows and becomes more sophisticated with all sorts of different industries, then the complexity of the advice is broadening.
The report also talks about the market in China sort of outperforming the West in many ways. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting, particularly on pricing models. So whereas we've seen in the US in particular, they've really struggled to sort of get rid of the hourly rate approach, and it's still over 90% of work, or just about that level, done under hourly rate pricing model. In China, that's not the norm. It's the norm to have an alternative pricing model, and they're just using hourly rates less than 10% of the time. So very different approach, and it just shows how without that sort of historical established way of doing things, new ways of working can take hold quicker.
Right. Are you seeing any differences between local firms versus international firms operating in China?
We're seeing differences in how sort of the way that clients are drawn to them. So when clients are drawn to global firms, they particularly talk about their global footprint, obviously their capabilities, but also the strong reputation that they have, and their professionalism in the way that they work. Whereas with local firms, they're much more attracted to the sort of established, strong relationships that they have with those local lawyers and the understanding of the business that they've generated over many years.
In the US, obviously, disruptors are having an impact on those demand numbers. Are you seeing the same thing in China?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's the disruptors driving the change, because the market's getting disrupted all the time from the general dynamic nature of it. But we certainly see those disruptors coming into the market, they're operating there, and they're taking hold nearly at the levels we're seeing in Western markets.
What about innovation? Are you seeing the same pace of innovation in China as we're seeing in the rest of the world, or is it ahead or behind?
Well, it's particularly focused on technology.
Okay.
And it's interesting because you see different technologies taking hold in China than might be taking hold in the US, for example. Some of that's going to be driven by which operators are working there and pushing those in the markets, but some of them just naturally might appeal more. So one example would be workflow automation, which is really taking hold with Chinese law departments.
Sure. What would you say are the key takeaways from the report?
I think the key takeaways, and it's not just for people operating in China, is, when you're in a market that's grown very quickly and is very dynamic, you're much more ready to embrace change. So I think in the West, they've struggled to lose the traditional ways of working, become very protectionist over that. Whereas in China, they're much more willing to try new things, which means that they could move rapidly ahead and become the most sophisticated market in the world eventually.
Right. Lisa, thank you very much for joining us and for all of your work on the report as well. The report can be downloaded at legalexecutiveinstitute.com.